In the biggest city in the country with arguably the most expensive real estate, affordable housing will be one of the core challenges for the mayor and the city council that'll be elected on Monday. Joining us now with some advice for those who elect them and those who get elected. Jan De Silva, she's president and CEO of the Toronto Region Board of Trade. Tim Hudak, CEO, Ontario Real Estate Association. Alfredo Romano, president of the Toronto real estate developer Castle Point Numa. And Moiriga, he is vice president of housing, homelessness and development at Wood Green Community Services. And it's great to have all of you around our table tonight for this discussion. And to set it up, Mr. Director, if you would, let's put some of these stats up here. Half of Greater Toronto and Hamilton area households spend 50% or more of their disposable income on shelter costs, 50% plus. From the years 2014 to 17, around 40,000 new rental units were built in Toronto, but only 1 in 40 was considered affordable housing. The city currently defines affordable as at or below the average market rent. Over that same period of time, just 1 in 400 new ownership units in the city were considered affordable. And again, the city defines affordable ownership housing costs as when the total monthly shelter costs equals the average Toronto rent. Let's do a couple more. From 2005 to 2015, one-bedroom apartment rent prices increased by 20%, while median household income increased by just 5%. And this month, PadMapper, that's an apartment rental search engine, lists the median asking rental price. Check this out. For a one-bedroom apartment, $2,230 a month. That is, of course, the most expensive in the country. Jan, to you first. I know the word crisis gets thrown around a lot, but do you think we're in the midst of a housing crisis?
We are in the midst of a housing crisis, and it's not just housing per se, it's every sector of the housing community. It's attainable housing, it's affordable housing, and it's social housing. And the gaps in each of those categories is having a huge ripple downstream effect for everyone trying to get into the housing market and access shelter.
Tim, which particular demographic do you think needs affordable housing the most?
Geez, well, millennials, I'll say if I want to nail one down. But Jan's exactly right. So if a family can't get a move-up home and the kids come along, they stay in the first-time buyer. That means somebody who's in an apartment can't get a first-time starter home. That means they stay in the apartment longer, so you don't get out of affordable or not-for-profit housing, and it backs up to homelessness. So it does impact folks across the board. I think where the most sympathy is, Steve, is with millennials. So this is for the first time in the history of our great country, homeownership rate is actually in the decline in Ontario and in Canada. Never happened before, and this is a time when we have low mortgage rates and a sustained economy. We're in a crisis.
Because they can't get in.
They can't get in, and it's just, you know, if we had a downturn, if there was a major recession, okay, you could get that. We're having a sustainable expansion of the economy. We have low mortgage rates, still relatively low historically, and they can't find a place to call home.
Moiriga, how are soaring prices affecting, in particular, Toronto's lower income people?
So the biggest change that we have seen in terms of the low income people, living in rooming houses. So as the housing prices continue to escalate, as some of the neighborhoods that traditionally housed people living in rooming houses come under serious pressure to convert to private homes. A lot of these people are sliding into homelessness, and it's a very serious problem. We also have an increasing number of people in the middle income zone that would normally be housed in the purpose-built rentals that are now in serious jeopardy of sliding into homelessness. My biggest story lately that really moved me was the recent fire at 650 Parliament.
It's in downtown Toronto.
It's in downtown Toronto. And again, a tragedy. Next thing, we have close to 200 households thrown out, and they have to find somewhere. Now, many of those people have been coming to Wood Green to try and get help in finding housing. Well, they were paying south of $1,000 for a one-bedroom, two-bedroom, because they were part of the old protected stock from the 1991 exemption. They're coming out into a market that you have just pointed out, at $2,000 plus north for a one-bedroom.
So how do they do that?
They don't have a chance. So what do? We end up spending public money putting those people in hotels. And how long can we do that?
Right. Alfredo, just before I ask you what I was going to ask you, tell us what you do.
I'm a property developer, so we develop residential, commercial, and industrial properties. We're heavily involved in the residential sector. And to everybody's point here, the industry is now the second largest industry in the province, the real estate industry, and is a very important part of the economy, needless to say. We have to be part of the solution. And I agree with Jan and Tim and the panel. We are definitely in a housing crisis, and the industry has to be part of the solution along with government.
How much subsidy do you require from government in order to be able to build something that is considered, quote unquote, affordable?
So the numbers vary, but you can, as a rule of thumb, you can hear as much as $100,000 per unit, and as low as $100,000 and as high as $140,000 per unit to actually create an affordable housing unit under the definition that you provided earlier.
All right, Jan, help us out with this. A few years ago, the current mayor of Toronto, seeking election, of course, announced his signature housing plan called Open Door. What did that consist of?
Well, Open Door was very much about creating incentives to get affordable housing built. So it guaranteed fast tracking of zoning approvals. It also guaranteed some incentives in terms of reduced fees. I think it was successful, and it's gone an important step forward for us, but the mayor will be the first to admit there's much more that he would like to see happening, and there's a lot of time that he's been spending looking at how do we address the supply side, because when I talk about a crisis, it's not a demand crisis. The demand's not going away, it's a crisis in supply.
So presumably this program was designed to be able to make it easier for you to do your thing.
That's correct.
Has it worked?
And it's worked to a certain degree. I think that obviously there's 2 years running now, the city has approved, I believe, 1,200 units, affordable units, and then 1,600, they're on track for 1,600 this year. So it's obviously proven to be a huge help. But even under the mayor's target of 40,000 units over the next 12 years, it would fall remarkably short of that number. So we need more drastic measures to incentivize. And Jan's absolutely right. This is a supply side issue. We've tinkered with the demand side. They've introduced more stringent mortgage requirements. We've taxed foreign buyers to try and moderate that demand. But the real issue is supply. We need to dramatically increase the supply of units that are in the pipeline, because you can throw all kinds of money at the affordability issue with all kinds of programs, but it's going to be a dog chasing its tail unless you rebalance the market by having a significant supply that can match the demand.
Well, let me put that to Tim. John Tory was here last week on this set talking about 40,000 units over a dozen years. He said he has asked his advisors whether that's doable, and everybody says, even that's pushing it. There just might not even be enough trades available to get all that stuff done. If that's the pickle we're in, is that doable?
I think it is, but you've got to change the system that slows it down. Look, Steve, Mayor Tory has his plan, Jennifer Keesman has her plan, everybody's got a plan. It's just going to be a matter of will to actually get it done. So what do I mean by that? Actually joining hands with the province. I think it'd be important if John Tory is reelected and Premier Ford to get along and work together. Their destinies are actually going to be joined by issues like transportation and solving the housing crisis. It's a matter of speeding up the approval process, which takes will, and quite frankly, standing up to municipal councillors who will often stand in the way, whether it's affordable housing or middle-class housing, to bow down to NIMBYism. That's the kind of will we need, and then the job will get done.
You are a former politician, of course. John Tory, he's one vote out of, I guess it's going to be 26 on council now. How do you wield your will to get local politicians out of the way when you're going to need their vote down the road for something you want?
I actually do believe that going down to 25 is going to raise the caliber of debate. It can enable you to focus on a mandate across the city. They'll have larger wards as well. So I think they'll be less likely to object to projects. Hopefully have a coalition behind them to get the job done, because I do believe that Mayor Tory and Doug Ford will be judged by, they solve those big issues. Can my daughter, who went to university, she got a job, find a place to call home, and can she get back and forth faster?
It's 25, isn't it? I said 26. You're right. It's
25.
It's 25, yeah. Thank you for the clarification. Can I ask you about Jennifer Keesmaat's plan? Because she says John Tory's plan is not nearly ambitious enough. He says 40,000. She wants 100,000. He says a dozen years. She says 10 years. Is it even possible to contemplate doing something that ambitious?
Yes, it is. I think the ambition is pretty much there. I believe the Board of Trade kind of suggested you can do 10,000 units a year. I think I actually think that both candidates provide a sense of ambition, a direction of ambition that is most welcome. The issue with the supply issue and trying to get 100,000 units, or whether it's 40,000 over 12 years, is what kind of supply are we looking for in order to address the affordability problem?
So what's the answer to that?
And the answer to that is we have allowed the more speculative private investment into the housing sector to lead the market. When the housing was more affordable for everybody, we had a much better balance of public investment and private investment in the real estate sector in general than we have today. And that imbalance is creating an escalation of rents and an affordability of ownership that is completely inconsistent with the wage rates that the average wage rate that people earn in this country.
Can I put some, here, Jennifer Keesmaat's got a bunch of ideas on this. Even John Tory, when he was here last week, said she's got a lot of good ideas. For example, green pea parking lots, start developing them. TTC lands, start developing them. Look at low-rise buildings where you could build on top of them. Look at libraries or rec centers that you could build on top of. Doable?
Absolutely doable, and we've been doing a lot of work with our young professionals. To Tim's point, the millennials really represents all the pain points in the housing market, from that first room that you need to rent when you're out of university, all the way through to how do you plan for a family and accommodating that. Our young professionals are saying the housing stock that's being made available right now is too skewed to, say, the one-bedroom plus den model. They're looking for more bedroom options. They're looking for gentle densification in our neighborhoods. They're absolutely looking for housing adjacent to or over transit in a big way. 40% of our young professionals say they'd move outside the city if they were located right on a transit network that would get them into their jobs.
I got to go back at this, though, Tim.
Yeah.
And again, calling on your political experience here. When the neighbors start going to their local councillor and saying, we don't want our neighborhood intensified, we don't like the idea of building on top of the library, we like it just like it is, what do you do?
You got to go forward. I know it's not always easy because municipal councillors will usually think about existing voters as opposed to those that are coming down the line. But the mayor can have leadership here. Quite frankly, a lot of this is going to be at the provincial level. You need the strength of leadership there as well. I'll give you a few examples. We had an Ontario Housing Summit recently with the landlords and the home builders and the realtors. We said you should be able to build above go in subway stations and LRT stations, whether in Toronto or spread out. I think a lot of millennials would die to live. We're in Canada. Just hop in the subway and go to work, right? Not worry about the coat. You do need the OMB, Steve. You do need a referee in the game to make sure that we follow the rules of the game. Nobody loves the referee, but if you don't do that, we won't get these housing units built. And the third one we put on the table we called as of right zoning, which would mean within a distance of a major subway or GO station, that developers would have permission to build higher and more dense. Those are the type of bold choices, but it'll get the job done.
What's preventing that from happening right now?
I was going to say, sorry. What I think is preventing it is that we're separating transit and housing. So we're spending $8.4 billion, 25 stations, Eglinton, Crosstown here in Toronto. Only 32,000 housing units are going to be developed or have been applied for within a 10-minute walk of those. So what's happening is we're taking all of this money to put it into transit, planning out the transit, and then thinking, oh, maybe we should think about housing. You need to have both things planned at once so you can get the construction going on that right basis to get the housing going.
Agreed.
Fredo.
Just like other industries, we really need some radical disruption. And I want to take Tim's point a step further. And you really do need the province to work with the municipalities to effectuate this. I would actually suggest to the mayoralty candidates that they approach the province. And this might sound a bit draconian, but they actually use ministerial powers to upzone all parking lots, all commercial retail strip malls that are across the GTA. And if you look at the enormity of that resource, it would have magnificent results. And you need to start doing that now to have impact 5 years from now, 10 years from now.
You know what would happen if you did that? A bunch of city councillors would have a heart attack saying you're infringing on our jurisdiction.
To your point, and there are councillors, for example, current councillors, they may get reelected, and there'll be future councillors. Councillor Mahevik, Councillor Bailao, they've been champions of affordable housing in the city of Toronto, and they think rationally, and they know that we need drastic measures for drastic times. Upzoning doesn't mean that you skew local concerns or that you override good urban practices. It just means that you allow the opportunity. And then the local councillors will have to deal with built form, shadow impacts, all the NIMBY issues. But by upzoning, by a evenly and balanced approach across the GTA, there are enormous amounts of land available that are currently servicing parking lots and commercial operations that, quite frankly, need to be refreshed and renewed. And you can build up. You can build up to 8 to 10 stories.
Municipal council could say, you know, damn that province, are forcing it, and then in the back room say, thank God you did it. Right?
That does
it takes
happen.
it off the municipal. It does happen from time to time. I've seen it once in a while. And I'd add a carrot to Alfredo's stick as well. Every budget, the provincial government or the national government have infrastructure funds, water, sewer, rail, the roads. Start targeting those to municipalities who are ready to go with housing-approved land. There's a lot of land, but it's currently locked out of commission because you don't have the water to turn the tap on or the driveway to park the car.
And if I could point to another source of supply that could be provincially directed, it's dealing with rent control, because it's counterintuitive. The level of rent control that's in place right now is preventing longer-term investors in long-term rental properties like pension funds, insurance companies from getting in the game. I think it's possible to have a modest level of rent control that still allows a sufficient return for those long-term investors.
Can I jump in there too? I'm not sure about that. I mean, we actually, if you look at the reality, we don't really have a rent control system in this country, and in this town especially. So when you build, you can start charging rent at whatever level. That is not rent control. When there's a turnover in the unit, you can charge whatever rent you want. The only thing that rent control does is to control people who are already renting a unit so that you don't come back at the end of a year and add on another $1,000. That was the whole essence about the Fair Housing Act, because of the story of Shannon Martin, who was featured in the CBC.
Yeah.
Because the landlord came back, she was already paying $1,600. Next lease renewal, he was asking for $2,600. That story played out in the news. It is not a good story. So you do have to have referees in the game, but I don't think that rent control has actually been an issue in this province for the last 15 years.
It is a supply constraint,
It
because
is not
you're not getting enough purpose-built rentals built because there's not sufficient return for those pension funds and those insurance companies that need a sufficient return out of those investments.
But the purpose rental area has had literally, the exemption has been there since 1991. That hasn't been the barrier.
But it's gone.
And it's gone.
It's good. Hang on, let's just bring everybody up to scratch here. It used to be that if you were a post-1991 building, there was different rules than the pre-91
That's
buildings.
correct.
It was easier.
So,
and then the Kathleen Wynne government put hard, fast controls on everything. Now, in your view, that has
We're not seeing sufficient apartment supply. Come on,
so it's been a disincentive to build new rental units.
It's been a disincentive.
To parse this out, I think you're right. I think we still have an opportunity to establish a base rent when you build a new building, a purpose-built rental. So, and the rent controls are obviously there to make sure families and individuals don't get displaced. But to Jan's point, it's absolutely correct. You have to really look at rental levels and to incentivize investors, institutional investors in particular, to increase supply, they have to be at reasonable rates. Our industry is entirely built upon very prudent lending practices. And that's what's made our industry very strong in Canada and particularly in Ontario. So you need to work with financing institutions to find those levels of rental income that will sustain financing so that developers can invest and get a reasonable return. Otherwise, it won't happen. So I think when we talk about affordable housing, we talk about a number of types of units and at different ranges in that basket. And I think we have to actually parse those out and understand what we're dealing with.
I've listened to a lot of them over the years, and it's pretty rare we can find almost every single economist who says they agree on the same topic. And rent controls are bad because they limit long-term supply. Look, each and every instance, The housing crisis revolves around supply, whether it's rental, whether it's affordable homes, whether it's single-family detached homes. We have a good problem. More people want to live, particularly in the Greater Toronto Hamilton area. Fantastic. Millennials now are getting jobs and promoted. They want homes. Fantastic. We have a major supply issue. That's the bottom line. And secondly, a big tax issue, particularly in Toronto, with a land transfer tax that really whacks you just to move across the street to get the keys. And that's keeping a lot of people frozen in the first-time home instead of moving up.
Mayor Tory, when he was here last week, did say that he met with you guys about that, and he needs that revenue in order to pay for everything
Still
else.
working on it. The
You're
Toronto
still,
board is working very
he
hard
mentioned
on
you
that.
were working on it, but not to first base yet on that one.
I was looking at the numbers by Urbanation, one of the research real estate marketing research organizations, and really what you see is that between 2012, there has been a huge increase in the amount of supply. If supply is the only thing, the only difference is because of the low interest rates, a lot of private individual capital also went into the real estate market. And that's what has increased the supply. So if there's any time in the last 40 years that supply has increased at an astronomical rate, it is the last 5, 6 to 8 years. The big difference in terms of making that stock affordable is the absence of a public investment component. And a public investment component is something like the Open Door program. Housing is actually, out of all the programs that we have, the one that has the most private money in it. And that's a good thing because unlike health, where you don't pay, and the public pays anything, here it's a partnership with the private sector. The public sector, the public investment is missing. Open Door is a good direction in that. The problem that the Open Door has run into is while we could build a unit at $300,000 a unit 5 years ago, now it's north of 400. So they need to keep increasing that amount of money. And that's what's going to keep the affordability down.
All right, let me take that, Janet, and put this to you. We hear over and over again, I don't know if it's true, you tell me, we hear over and over again, it's really hard still to get stuff through City Hall. It's hard to get development approval processes going and so on. Is that still a factor?
Certainly, we see a lot of opportunity to look at streamlining the planning process and the speed to market on activities. One area we've been particularly paying attention to is Section 37. This is a development charge if you're going
Section 37 of what?
of the city of the Cities
Planning
Act.
Act,
The
yeah.
Planning
the
Act.
Planning Act,
But
okay.
it's where basically what happens is it's intended to provide some community benefits if you're building at a level that's a little outside of where the planning was. So you've seen parks and other things get developed. But what we've been advocating for is a model like Vancouver, where the fee structure is standardized, because right now, development community, we hear it could be up to a year negotiating with a counselor at a counselor level for how much you have to pay, and it's then at the discretion of the counselor where those funds get deployed.
So just so I understand that, so you want to build 5 or 10 more stories on that condo or on that purpose built. I need a daycare center, I need a park, I need a library.
Affordable housing.
That's the way it works.
Affordable housing also comes under the purview of Section 37.
It does.
That's how it's been achieved over the last couple of decades,
Yeah.
through Section 37 negotiations, and there's no rhyme or reason to it.
Is there anything wrong with that?
What we would argue is the Vancouver model makes sense because it's a standardized Section 37 charge, so you don't need to go into a negotiation depending on the type of product that's coming to market. It's just preordained. And what we would also argue would make sense for those funds to be more transparently reviewed in terms of the application of those funds by City Council at large, rather than right now it sits within the
They're being
boards.
too polite. It's a shakedown. It's a shakedown. Like if I tried that when I was a cabinet minister, Steve, I would have been kicked out of cabinet. Look, I'll let you build that casino if you do this park and by riding or build this arena. I mean, come on. Jan and Alberta are absolutely right. This is a shakedown. Make it a standard rule across council so you don't empower one city councillor to fund a pet project at the expense of housing for millennials.
But that's a provincial legal change that's necessary.
Absolutely.
Is that right?
That's
You got
correct.
Yeah, and I think as Wood Green is, of course, a nonprofit, one of the largest nonprofit developers in the city of Toronto. And in the process of developing, the one thing that I would say we need to look at more closely is when you need rezoning, it gets very complicated. In a development process, we found that that's where 60% of the time is wasted. The technical side of site approval and the actual building permit is not that it's actually pretty reasonable. The thing about the zoning issue is then it becomes a public conversation.
Yeah.
And there's value in engagement, and I'm all for it. But sometimes it degenerates into neighborhood politics, the
Yes.
whole issue of NIMBYism.
Yep.
That's where the delay is happening. And some of what we're doing and what we do as Wood Green in order to try and reduce that period is to work more engaged with our councillors, work with our communities, explain to them the benefits of affordable housing and the need for an inclusive neighborhood. And I think that has helped us kind of reduce the resistance period, which is what the zoning period essentially becomes. And it's a tough one because it's supposed to be a positive engagement period, but it ends up being something else. And that's where I think the issue is for me.
I wouldn't let the current candidates, both for city council or the mayor's position, off the hook that easily. I do agree with Jan. We do need to throw some resources at the process and speed it up. It is the city's overwhelmed. They have dozens and hundreds of applications that they have to deal with. The departments at the city aren't able to manage it very well because it's just overwhelming. There's just too much. So the candidates have to address the process itself. And a year, I'd be thankful for a year in process.
It goes longer than that.
Much longer.
Yeah.
That's just not.
right, can I
that's
throw
just
another-
not reality. It's a number of years, and the standardized Section 37. Section 37 is not the only issue, but standardizing Section 37 requirements is absolutely the way to go, and it should include inclusionary zoning.
Okay, I was just going to ask you about
Okay,
that.
sure.
Yeah.
Explain what it is and whether it's a good thing.
So it's definitely a good thing, simply because it creates a level playing field.
What is it?
It's to apply to all developments across the city. And you would pick a percentage, let's just say 10% of all the units that you would build, and those would be categorized and provided as affordable housing by the developer or a developer and its partner. Such as your company. And the reason why it's a good thing is, one, because you remove this backdoor dealing on and trying to provide affordable housing. I was involved in one negotiation to provide 300 units on the waterfront. It took 3 years to negotiate. But it was a successful outcome. And it's a great model that could be used to develop inclusionary zoning.
Do people know which 10% of the units in the building are subsidized?
Well, if they're amalgamated in one section of the development, then they would, but there shouldn't be any difference. You shouldn't be able to have a noticeable difference between an affordable rental unit and a market rental unit. They would use the same amenities. So presumably that's what happened. In other words, we would avoid what they call poor doors, right?
Understood.
Okay,
And
so
I'm also wondering, like, do the 90% of the people who would be paying market rates, are they cool with subsidizing 10% of the others?
I honestly think that our society has advanced to the point now where this is not an issue anymore.
Okay.
I really believe that. And even in the marketplace, I think that's true. Torontonians and Ontarians in general, Canadians, we're very tolerant and understanding people. And let's face it, our communities need to be populated with a mix of people, both diverse in terms of race, ethnicity, and economic stature.
Can I get Tim's take on that? Inclusionary zoning, you for it or against it?
It's done the right way for it, and by the right way, I do believe there's going to be a public benefit, that you're going to include affordable housing in, say, a middle-class neighborhood, that should be paid for more broadly by the taxpayer. Maybe it's city-owned or provincial land that's given to them at a lower rate, for example, or waive some development charges. I don't think that the neighbors should have to pay the additional cost of that additional housing. It should be the taxpayer to hold. Otherwise, it's a good idea.
Your thoughts?
I think if you remind me, there's an option of cash in lieu of the 10%.
That's correct.
Yeah. So I actually think it might be better for the city to collect the cash, create a pool of funds that they then use and inject into specific developments in partnership with the private sector, because that's the only way to provide affordable housing. And within that context, have a much better agreement about the outcome of what they want to achieve, including the returns. And I think the problem is we have a slate of investors, some who want quick gain, but I think we need to start working with the more patient capital. If you do that, I think you can move that number up from 10% up closer to 20%.
The patient capital you're referring to, which Jan has also spoke to, definitely has long-term thinking, and the returns have to be much lower. So I grant you that, but I honestly believe that you need inclusionary zoning so that every development, and because our industry is certainly not on the same page on this, and to get them across that line, you really need to legislate this and basically say you have to take up this social responsibility and be part of the solution. And you're right, we need the tools. Cash in lieu is it's definitely a good tool, but then you have to ensure that cash is absolutely targeted and used for affordable housing.
Correct.
It doesn't just go off into some black hole
I agree with you
at City Hall.
100%. 100%.
And I was going to say, with inclusionary zoning, this is really critical for our workforce because we've got different salary levels, different roles in our workplace. And unfortunately, what's happening with the unaffordability of homes or housing in the city, folks are having to move further and further and further out, and they're the ones that can least afford it. So we've got examples of really important service staff working in our hotels downtown that are living in Mississauga, having to transit 3 different transit systems daily, an hour and a half one way, $20 one way to get to jobs. And it's just not fair. We need to be able to have people living closer to jobs of all income brackets.
And then when you combine that with some of the initiatives to try and to try and cap minimum wage, you have a problem because now not only does the person have to try and find accommodation out there, you can't pay them enough money to be able to afford housing. So it's a real crisis for me.
Alfredo,
Steve, we can ground this and put it in context. If inclusionary zoning was implemented by Mayor Lastman,
excuse me?
by Mayor Lastman 20 years ago.
Oh, I see.
Okay, let's go back. Let's dial back 20 years.
Okay.
Inclusionary zoning's in place. We would be 30,000 units ahead today. So now is the time to act. It's not going to be easy to work this out. The devil's in the details. But I think there's a political will, both at the province finally and at the city level, to implement inclusionary zoning. And if you don't do it now, the goals that have been targeted by both, certainly by Mayor Tory at 40,000 and certainly Keesmaat at 100,000, they're just not achievable. Okay. So inclusionary zoning, amongst other tools.
I got literally a minute left here. I want to ask Tim about this because here's a completely different wrinkle on this. There are lots of people in this capital city that are actually overhoused. You know what I mean by this? Since 2001, the numbers say 52% of the landmass of Toronto has reduced in density by about 200,000 people. There are 2 million spare bedrooms in the Toronto area. Many people are desperate for housing. Many people have too much housing. What do we do about that?
2 things. Number one, you have to find housing, make housing available they can move into. My parents were in this category. They had the family home, too many bedrooms, but there wasn't a place that suited them, right? So then they moved, that family home opened up, but it took a long time. So that's a supply suggestion. Secondly, the NDP actually had a very good idea on this in their platform, the provincial election, which was to give a greater ability of people to rent out those granny flats or to separate spots. That would create a lot of affordable rental housing units in every neighborhood in our cities.
I've now lived long enough to hear the former leader of the Ontario PC Party defend a new democratic policy idea. There you go. The new you. There you go. Thanks, everybody, for coming on to TVO tonight and helping us out with this discussion. Great to have you all aboard.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye. Yeah.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.